do the admin afterwards. Okay, over to you, Greg.
Okay, this is the delivery orchestration demo meeting for September 4th, EMEA/APAC time. So on the agenda, first up, I would just like to review the epic for basically the pages managed versioning. Hold on, I'm just going to open this up and I'll share my screen. Hopefully this doesn't work without issue. Is this the right page? Everyone see move pages? Or is this the wrong screen? I'm trying to. Can anyone see my screen?
Yeah, move pages component to manage.
Cool, perfect. So this is basically the epic, which more or less is going to align with our OKRs for GitLab pages to basically move them to manage versioning, which means, you know, they're giving over kind of, I guess you could say, control to the versioning scheme and everything related to that to us in delivery. And then we basically use release tools and extend that to support the pretty standard operations that release tools does to extend the GitLab pages, just like it does for Gitly and a bunch of other components as well. So basically, I've kind of tried to capture here that currently the pages service, they use their own versioning scheme. It is Semver, but it is basically a completely different versioning scheme that's based different to what we use for obviously the GitLab product. Looking at the steps they have to do for a release, they have to manually tag, they have to manually create a branch if they need to for say backports and stuff. They run a make command in their repository to generate the change log. And then they have to manually change the GitLab pages version in GitLab org whenever the new release is done to kind of keep, you know, once they do the tag, then they also have to go and bump that in the GitLab main repo. So basically, yeah, in this epic, we want to move them over into what we have defined now as managed versioning. I'm by no means an expert in all of this. Obviously, this will be the first component I've kind of helped migrate to this kind of setup. So I'm very interested in feedback from yourself, Alessio and Amy, on is this the right exit criteria? Is this the right breakdown of work? And things like that. What I've broken the issues into, and this might be the part where I'm not entirely sure. I have one that's basically modifying the chatup's tag command to support pages, so it'll actually do pages as well and essentially tag it. And then I've done another issue here to make the release process automatically update GitLab pages version in the GitLab org thing as part of like, so basically at the end, you know, like actually updating the version file in the GitLab org repo. And then hang on, have I got done to here? Hang on, I think that's right. And then the final command, so final part is enabling deployments environments feature. So at the moment for components that we do this for, when they auto deploy, we actually have a job, which I think I found in Deployer, I think, or was it release tools? I can't remember. It was somewhere I was looking at it. This track deployment job. It is in release tools.
It's Deployer that triggers release tools.
Okay, right. Okay, fair enough. The end result is when we do auto deploys, we go back and actually in the code for in the repository for the component, we, you know, if you go into the environments page there, we actually update. So put a deployment object in there. And the big key piece for that is it links to, for them and for everyone publicly can see, you know, what in each environment, what deployment is running, and it has the link to the actual like SHA, right? Like, so this Git commit is currently running in staging. This Git commit is currently running in production. But it turns out this is actually important because some of the work that needs to be done for, I believe this is based off the fact that we use that environments feature as the ledger for what version is being currently run, right? Because when we want to say, right, we're going to tag right now, or let's say we're going to create an RC, what is running in production? And so that's the source of truth, which is actually really good and really powerful. It is a little bit tricky, obviously, because we have like deployer and release tools kind of doing it, but it is very powerful because it does show right away. You go to the component, you go to the deployment screen, and you can see right there. We get a very good user experience out of it. So yeah, is that kind of like is that the big things? Am I missing anything? I feel like this one could be fleshed out. I just don't know enough about the code base to say, you know, is this enough to get us started, or do I need to break down more?
Okay, so thank you for writing this. I was reviewing this morning. So I think that overall this describes more or less all the steps we need to be doing for this. There are some, let's say, I don't think that the modifying the GitLab file in itself is something that we should be doing as a separate thing. So probably the breakdown, if we want to make this in iteration and more than one merge request, probably we should find another way to break it down, because basically what I'm trying to think here is that if there is a way when we can set up some kind of preparation for this and then merge it in steps and see, let's say if we can generate change logs, and then later on we see what happens with other things up to the point where we actually bump this. But what am I afraid of is that if we end up tagging GitLab pages, but we don't bump the version file, then the final, what will be in the final package? Because the final package that we ship to customer includes it builds the component from the content of the version file. So what I'm thinking here is that if we're when we start tagging, we should in lockstep also update the version file, because those two things together generate the final thing. So that's something. What's the other thing? The tracking, deployment tracking should probably happen before. Actually,
so we should do that first.
Yeah,
cool, makes sense. Yeah,
because then it goes into, because it's the entry point for you to generate the thing, right?
Should we be thinking about that step as something which we should group with auto deploy, like bringing people into auto deploys?
Yeah, but but pages is already now deployed.
Yeah, no, I mean for us to think about for when we do.
Yeah, we were discussing this, but this is what I meant when I said in one of the other code when we were talking about what are the real dependency for the steps, right? Because in order to have this, it has to be there. But there's also another dependency which I need to double check in code, but I'm quite sure is there, which is the metadata tracking. So GitLab pages is tracked on metadata, so it's already there. So it should be fine. It's even worth checking, and that's an important thing that what I say metadata, because this is one of those things that we re-implemented several times in the code base, and then I'm not sure which versions are we using. But basically, in many features, we start from the product version, which means give me the last deployment in terms of GitLab metadata. And so it will be the 15.3 timestamp. Okay, so there are processes where we start with that value. If the tagging starts with that value, then it will be able to get the proper pages version with that, because from the product versions, we infer the metadata file. From the metadata file, we can grab component versions. And being already tracked there, it kind of gives us a global ledger for everything in a package. As I said, the public release classes are kind of a special thing because they are they don't use the same code base, the same code path as the auto deploy thing. So it's entirely possible, because it's older, that one is actually going in every single component and checking its own deployment with the component deployment API, which I'm quite sure because of the problem of the pick into auto deploy. Because we know that if we pick into auto deploy, we will need to do manual step before tagging something, or we'll tag the wrong thing.
Yeah. Okay. So am I correct? Do we, so bit of, I guess, doing a quick bit of cleanup here. Do we order like the first task, do we put at the top? Is that how we kind of typically order these? Or is there no real...
We don't have to order necessarily this epic. We can just, I think if we have one step that we definitely need to get done before the others, we can just make sure that one, whoever ends up being the DRI for this, can make sure that goes on the board and gets handled, and the DRI basically can control the flow of issues. So
yeah, we can also make that as a blocker.
Yeah, we can also.
Yeah, true. Okay. Yeah, so I think you're right, Alessio. I was also looking at this. I was like, it sounds like they also depend on each other, how we actually do this without like just dumping it into one issue and trying to do it in one implementation. So I agree. I'm happy to rewrite or like rework these. So it sounds like we probably, actually what we want is, yeah, so we probably want to do this first, right? We want to just enable the deployments environments, GitLab pages already, just getting that out, getting the API, getting it to start calling that API, setting that value. It sounds like this is kind of maybe we're saying is one of the later things that needs to be kind of done.
Yeah, I think that probably is part of 2580, because I can see a situation in which we are going to merge the implementation for the first one, and then later on just add one line that changes that file, because that affects the end result. So if that bump is not there.
So is there a way we can break this? Like, so let's say hang on. So let's say this issue, if I kind of just close that out and move that into this, but then how can we break this one out, for example? Is there a way we can break it out, or is it just going to have to be something?
That's what I was trying to think, right? Because
yeah, sure.
In theory, this is just handling of a component. So it's either in or is not in. Because what we could, if we want to do this, say, we can think of something like we create the branches, but we don't tag, or this type of situation. But is it really worth doing?
Yeah.
That's the point, right? Especially because we already have the whole implementation. Because basically, this is the same implementation that we have for Gisli.
Exactly.
Minor details to iron out, but this is kind of the steps are well known. That's the thing, right? So we know the steps that it should be, the implementation should be take care of. It's already written in code. So I kind of see this more like it's enabled or not enabled, and maybe you have a feature flag to disable it entirely, right? Okay. So we say we test this with the RC. We are kind of maybe the milestone we start with this thing. We do kind of say,
yeah, we
do earlier Cs, right? We start a couple of days ahead of time, and we book time so that we know that we will consider looking closely at what happens to pages in this, because it will be the first rollout for pages. And yeah, that's
okay. That makes
also need
sense.
to make. I think we may also need to have guard around the minimum version that is supporting this, right? So we're gonna do
I agree.
We're gonna do a patch release, security release, and then we know that only the current milestone will be managed, and the previous one will not, right? So,
or actually, okay, so question then, rather than having to put guardrails in the code around this, do we do something like go back for the past 3 releases and create literally manually, just go git branch create, git tag, like, because you can keep the old tags and the new tag, like, you know, tags are tags, you can have as many as you want.
Yeah.
So do we instead of creating complex in the code?
Yeah,
Do
that's a
I
good
just
point.
spend like a day and just create the branches, you know, just go in, push them up, obviously work with the pages team, but be like, I'm just going to recreate all of the supported branches we need. So that way we can just move on.
So we should double check, because I'm quite sure that the code is idempotent, in the sense that
yes.
it searched the stable branch. If
Yes,
not found, it will
it
create
does.
based
Create
on
it. Yeah.
what is supposed to be there. So but probably the only thing we need to double check is if we'll create it from master, or if it will create it from the content of the version file. Say it reads the
Right.
Gitly version. I don't because these things change over time. Say it reads the Gitly version file, it will just create the right branch when we tag the patch. If not, we can just create the stable branches manually, and then it will tag. So we say we pick the pages version in the past 3 milestone, and from that tag we create stable branches with the milestone name.
Yep. So we should. So I might even do an extra issue on this to double check maybe the rollout, the branches tags for existing release milestones. Because really that's what we want. Like, because there's definitely implementing this stuff. So the next time we run it, it all just creates a new stuff. But you're right, we need to figure out what we're going to do for the previous stuff. I'm hoping we can just be like, okay, as you said, I'll go to the stable branches in GitLab org, find the pages versions like 168 or whatever they are, then go back, then create the branch, then create the tags, and then we can just, from then on. And then, in 3 months' time, that doesn't matter anymore because it's all the new automation has created the new branches, and then the way we go.
I do have. So let me do a step back. I would like to talk about point number 2 because it kind of fits into this.
Sure.
So I don't know if maybe we can get back to the point number 1 if we think there are other things to discuss. But what I would like to. Okay, thank you, Amy, for writing. I haven't read the thing. So there's this conversation. This is 1 month ago, so it's after or before the one that I linked. So 22nd of July, and mine is.
Yours is newer.
Same. So basically, you told you.
So let's just verbalize. So the question.
Yeah, sure.
Is
So
like,
it makes sense.
pages,
yeah. So yeah,
okay,
there is an issue in
maintainers
pages where maintainers are describing what they want to do with versioning. So if they are okay with aligning, so basically with embracing the managed versioning, and the conversation there goes a bit of not in the same direction of what we are doing, because on one side it seems kind of proposing we can implement things ourselves. On the other hand, is more like there is the question about the patch release, which is I will describe what happens with Gitly. Our point is that we don't care if there is something new or not to release. When we release everything, which means we retag and we bump the version and we retag, because it just makes things easier.
It's easier.
And the changelog, we just say there's nothing in changelog. So, it's the same as before. But overall, it gives a shared understanding that this is GitLab 12.3.4, whatever. Okay, so there's one discussion in that issue about patch releases, where we would like to detach from patch releases, which is, not what we want. I mean, it's either managed or is not managed. So you take the full package or not.
Yeah.
So, and this kinds of open, my question was, are we sure they are in line with what we're going to do? Amy, you pointed to the message, which I'm not sure if that message triggers this conversation or this conversation triggered the message.
Yeah,
but,
I'm not sure.
This is overall question. The overall point here is that there is socializing effort that should happen as part of this OKR to make sure that developers, maintainers mostly, maintainers of those components understand what we are trying to do. They like what we're trying to do, because we will want to force them on this thing, right? So because this will also imply changes on their workflow. For instance, I don't know how they manage the changelog, but if they are not managing with the GitLab formats, they have to change it. They will lose control over their versioning, which we say we will remove chores from them, but they may feel that we're losing control. So that's important to state to them, make sure that they are in alignment together with, and that's the kind of the biggest question with how do we want to handle developers, the maintainers deciding to create a new release. No new release, deciding to bump the version 5. That's the point, right? So because we have another step in our say integration levels, which is the automatic versions update,
version bump,
version bump, which is another step, right? So if they don't get that one, they don't want that one, whatever, how do they bump? And
well, before you go on that, so I think what we should do is make sure that we are able to kind of show them people. Like, I think for all of these changes, for every component and every step, we can just make sure, well, part of our work, I think, is we make sure that we have a really clear, like, here is what changes, here's what you lose, here's what you gain. Like, I think we have a similar thing we're going to have to do for the CAS auto deploy, because we know they also lose stuff. So perhaps that's like a piece that we also just factor in here, is make sure that we have a and maybe that's part of our coming back to one, right? We can do that towards the end, but make sure in that epic we have a really clear outcome which says this stuff goes from being like this and it goes to being like this, and here's what you gain and here's what you lose, and then we can pop it in front of them.
But in fact, we should
go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say, very quick note, we should not only should we put that in that epic, when we do the handbook page for these definitions, we should add that in as well. So what I really want is for these kind of discussions to be like, we want to put you on managed versioning. Here's the handbook page. It's got the definition. It shows you those benefits, what you can and can't do. So that way, because that way it makes it easy to have this conversation. It's not just on an epic and we have to keep cutting and pasting to different groups.
Sure.
It's right there in the handbook and we make it clear.
So then there's a question for us, which is, how do we want them to handle the file? Say we just give them this. So the first iteration will be, we give you managed versioning. So the only point in time where we change the version file is when we tag, so that we align with the tag, right? So that being said, how do we tell developers to bump the version file? Will they bump with the SHA? Because something that we have done for Gisali, which is because that has a different need, is that developers are able to tag RCs. The RC versioning is say not manual. They have control over RCs, so they can tag extra RCs if they want.
What's the reasoning behind that?
They have that's a good point. So the reason behind that is that they also release a gem file.
That whole
and so this gives them control over releasing the gem file so that they can bump the dependency. This is not true for pages. So pages don't need anything like this. So if we think it's a good way of putting this, we can say them, if you think something is ready, you can just bump the version file with SHA, which is fine, as long as we, prerequisite again, make sure that pages can build from a SHA.
Yep.
Because we don't know
so,
right now.
Just to clarify, so I'm clear on the process, when we go in and create new branches, and so creating new branches, I guess for the monthly release is easy, right? It's just whatever is passing on master. Like we just literally go to the front and say, okay, that's it. So it's really like patch releases and stuff. When do we create when we create the tags, I guess that's off the head of the stable branch, right? Like, I guess what I'm trying to understand is, do we use what's in the GitLab or GitLab version files as the source of what to tag, like what's in those version files? Or is it the other way around? We tag and then update the GitLab org repository with what we just tagged. You know what I mean? Do we look for that to tag or?
So in theory, those two things are the same value.
Yeah,
in
that's
practice,
what I'm getting.
This is what should happen, right? They should be in sync. The implementation for decision made in the past by the engineer who was implementing that decided to give credit to the API information. So there was this thing they didn't want to create a dependency between the two repositories. Yeah. So the point is to say we're gonna run. We just have an order of operations. So because we know that we need a Gitly release before we can do a GitLab release, because we first start Gitly and then we update the version file in there. So that's the order. So when Gitly kicks in, is not checking the status of the say stable branches on GitLab org itself. Is just searching for
it's just
for the way we run operation. These things they have the same value. But let's say for any reason you roll back a Git, it never happened. But if you roll back a Gitly right before creating the RC42, that's the point in time when we create the stable branches, then those value would not be the same, because the rollback will take priority. So what will happen there is that you will generate the Gitly stable branch from the rollback version, which will, so we take the SHA of that package, create stable branch for there, tag RC42, and then when you go into the GitLab stage, you are not checking this again. You are assuming that something before created the RC42 for you. And so you say, this is RC42.
Yeah, right.
So that's the point where the two processes diverge a bit.
Okay, so now I'm wondering, once again, thinking about the terminology and everything, whether we say for patch releases, for non-master releases, part of getting managed versioning is we have to add that part that keeps those in sync. Like you don't get that option. You can only ever get it. You can only ever manually bump on master. Does that make sense?
Can you try to explain?
Maybe I'm not. So I guess what I'm saying is, so if I understand you correctly, so let's say we do the managed branching, managed versioning work for pages. So now they've got stable branches. They're getting us to tag their stuff, and we're also updating the GitLab org version file for them in the GitLab org repo. So we're doing all that now. But then we're saying that so the pages developers also want to bump that file themselves sometime. Is that what we're saying? That's the part because to me, it's like, well.
Okay, yeah, I understand. Let me try to re-ask your question, see if I understood what you're asking. So, when we talk about tagging, so managed versions and tagging, we are not. So we just take a snapshot of something and relabel everything and tag everything and create packages. So in all the conversation around this, there's no say input from developers, because developers will not be part of this. We will just take care of what was deployed and propagate for that. That's for the monthly. Patches are different. Patches are stable branches there, fine, tag. So there's no checking anything. It's just it's a monthly. We need to generate stable branches from something. If not, we already have stable branches. So it's tag and published. where do we have this developer involvement is from auto deploy. So what
Okay,
you were
so
referring to, the master thing, the master.
Yes.
So
okay, so this is for master. Gotcha.
That's the thing, right? So and this was part of my question earlier, which is today if they want to update pages, they tag a release, they bump the version file, and this will be in the monthly.
Yeah. So I think sorry, keep going.
So what we give them is what we describe here doesn't change this, right? So they still have to bump the master version file accordingly to they're willing to release something.
Yep.
The point is that they don't release, right? So they can change this as many times as they want. When it's time to release, we release from the last thing we deployed for them.
I get what you're saying. So at the moment, they can, like, for auto deploying, they create a release and then say update the master version file in GitLab.org with that release number. But we're going to be, and I see the well, not confusion, but I do see what we have to be careful of is we're saying you don't have to release anymore. We release for you. But then they're going to be confused because they're like, well, I need to do a release to update auto deploy.
The big problem is we use the word release for many things.
Yes,
right?
Well, this is, yeah. But no, it makes sense. It's like we're saying you don't cut releases anymore, which is fine. But there's a clear in their headspace, their process. They're like, we have to cut our own release because that's the only way to do auto deploy.
Those things are tied for them, right? They cut release.
I think you're right. So we either they have to build for, like, it becomes a requirement for this process is they can build their packages successfully for auto deploy from SHA. Like that has to become a hard requirement. Or, and I'm not even sure if I like this idea, they can just tag with an arbitrarily name that's something different, right? They can just tag internal tags. And I'm not really sure if I prefer one way or the other. I mean, SHAs are great because they're really descriptive. So and then they don't even have to do a git tag thing. They can just put the SHA. So really, I'm okay if we just say, no, you got to do the work, however small or big, to actually be able to release from SHA. And I think it makes sense too, because in my mind, of continuous auto deploy is designed as a continuous delivery process. And so the point of continuous delivery process is you shouldn't be manually doing this release thing. You should be trusting the auto release process. So I think I think we have to put as part of managed versioning requirement is that your product must be able to be built from a SHA, just so that way we remove that part. And then that way auto deploys just function like that. We take away releases from you and you get into auto deploy with just building by SHA, and that just happens automatically. If they want, they might start, and in this case, they might start with doing the SHA themselves. So they were like, okay, we want to take this SHA from us, and not the, well, yeah, I don't know. They might not just want to immediately jump into the what we call Gitly updater, right? Which we're going to have to rename, but the automatically, like, looking at pipeline and just bumping. They might want to still do that manually, but it still has to be a SHA, and we just say that's the SHA, and then that will still work fine because the SHA will go out, it'll auto deploy out, and then we can, tag still based off the the deployments and environments of what's running in what environment, and everything will work. But yeah, no, that is a good point, that we do need to be clear about that as well. So we do need to start expanding on these definitions and including these hard requirements.
I have mixed feeling about the internal tagging. I proposed this myself as well, but I think it creates more complexity. I mean, from the technical point of view, it changed nothing. So what we described here works either with an internal tagging or with a SHA. Assuming we can build from both.
Either way.
So exactly. So that's fine, but it creates a mental gap, right? So how do they create those internal tags? Why? What's the version numbering there, right? So maybe they can just create a date, make it be internal, and then the timestamp. If this helped them to understand, when did I last time bump the version? How old is the last? Okay, fine. But as you said, the end goal is the continuous delivery, and we give them, it's kind of we give them control to do this manually if they prefer. We can even start doing this earlier. So if we can build from the SHA, something we need to verify, then they can start putting SHA right today.
So yeah, exactly.
And eventually,
right now,
if we're gonna make monthly release and all of this is not ready, they will still have the package will still be working. That's the important part, right? Because we propagate the version file, so they will just, if ever we are going to make a patch release or a security release for pages in that milestone, going to be tricky because say what pages wasn't there? Nothing. Yeah, because there's a SHA. But that's the thing, right? So we can already test if this is working. We can even do this for on auto deploy. We say just change the version tag in auto deploy branch with the SHA. So it will rebuild the same package, exactly the same one, but we are going to test if and this works or not, right? But yeah, I agree with you. We should put the build from SHA as a hard requirement. We should put this up front to developer, and we should be describing the benefit of this, right? Because in the end, today they do cutting a release with changelog, all the shorts plus bumping. We're gonna say at this stage of automation, you still have to bump manually, but you bump with a SHA. So you keep track of the SHA. That's it. And then it's also easier to figure out what's the diff, right? Because you take the old SHA and say, give me the diff since this SHA, and it kind of give you how back you are from master, but they still retain control. And then we can suggest do with automation.
Yeah,
as a
no, I agree. I think that makes sense. And then, yeah, that makes sense to me. And then, so are we saying we should, so I'm just trying to capture this now. Are we saying that we should be pushing them to move to auto deploys via SHA as a first step? Like,
yeah, this has to be in place before.
Okay, so we need to
otherwise
get that done.
we enabled this, it doesn't work, and we're screwed up, right? So because that's the entry point for them, right? So there will be a point in time where we say, from now on, we can take on releases for you, but you don't have to tag anymore. So you update these pages by bumping the SHA. But this is something we can already test internally, because we can just coordinate with them and say, can we bump this version file right now to see if the package goes through? I mean, we can test manually by triggering manual builds on CNG and Omnibus. This is possible. We can even do this up front just as a validation. Sure. The pipeline gets to the end. We have working packages, fine. Then next step, take an auto deploy branch, whatever it is, and commit change on the GitLab pages version file. We just replace the same version. Instead of referring it by the SHA, by the tag, we refer with the SHA of that same tag. So end result, we will deploy the same thing, just a wasted deployment, but it will give us an extra hint that yes, this can work. Okay. And once we have all those things in place, we can decide to just say, hold on this, we will build the automation, and then you switch using SHA, or we can even say, you can start using SHA right now. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so that's another prerequisite issue that I'll open, because that sounds pretty important. We need that done. I mean, in general, we need these components in auto deploy. Like, they need to be they need to be doing this in auto deploy. Just thinking about like we're talking about pages today, which is great, but thinking about CAS, like they're not even in auto deploy at the moment, which is fine, because that's one of our OKRs and that's in progress. But yeah, sounds like we really need to get that we really need to get them in auto deploy and that piece together as well. It's like you're not using, you need to be able to build from a SHA so that you're slowly walking away from the concept of tags yourself, so that you're ready for us to take over. And I think we'll push against, well, not against, but we'll say try to avoid internal tags, because I think it'll lead to more confusion. I agree. I think it leads to more confusion, because especially when they'll start being like,
well, what version of our internal tag is it's deployed in this patch? You know what I mean? It's too easy for people to just start falling back into, well, I've made this internal tag. Like, I do see it in conversations already, and I think this goes to what you were saying, Alessio, about talking to the team and about making sure they're on board, is that it's definitely easy for them to be like wanting to pick and choose the pieces they get at a very low level. I want you to, I want to do the tag, my own tagging, but I want you to like somehow make it all work into the thing. We can't do pick or choose use cases for people. I think it just becomes way too complicated. I think you just see that you do it all this way, or you do it yourself, kind of thing.
Yeah,
not
I
like,
agree. I mean, we certainly like we can't provide every service right now. So I think this is the other thing where we can kind of choose what order we roll things out, and people can opt in at that stage, or if that doesn't meet their needs, not. And over time, maybe we'll end up with all the components haven't opted in for the same reason. We can address that. But if we end up with lots of people wanting very unique stuff, then I don't think we can try and support that.
Do we even need to, for these components that we are like, you're in the GitLab managed, the managed versioning scheme, should we even be having a very small check in the gitlab.org GitLab repo, a CI check, so that those version files do, like, if you're a master or whatever, they have to contain a SHA, and it's got to be a valid SHA in the other repo. Do you know what I mean? Like, should we be like hard enforcing that so that people don't access?
That's part of the CI itself, at least for, I'm talking about Gisli now, because Gisli is what is in there. So Gisli is built as part of the CI of the GitLab org CI from the content of the thing. So it is not checking if it's a SHA or not, because again, when they need to bump the version because they releasing the gem, they can put a tag in there. So we need something that is buildable.
Yeah.
And so what we will end up doing is, no matter what you write there, maybe you wrote there an RC version or anything you think you wrote something there. I don't care. When we do the monthly, from that point in time, we will branch off and create a stable branch.
Yeah, right.
That's the thing, right? This is what happened.
Okay.
Oh. And I feel like it fits quite well together. I think what will be really interesting to see actually is, as we put these options together and have like the kind of like gains and losses, I guess, of what people will get, it'll be very interesting to see which stage groups, like, do they all are they fine with that, or actually do we see a kind of a theme appearing that people don't like certain aspects? But I think we'll have to just get that together and ask them.
Yeah.
It feels like if we got that really clearly written out for the pages one, it would be pretty easy for us to also just copy that over onto the CAS Epic, and we could ask them at the same time, because we know we're waiting on Canary for the auto deploy, but it would be interesting just to double check like that they are really okay with like what they're going to, like the process change they'll get from that stuff. Alessio, do you want to maybe take an action to put like a small sort of thing together that just maybe highlights, like, if you adopt managed versioning, here is what you'll gain, and here are the constraints that will come with
someone
this.
ringed at my doorbell. I'm alone, so I need to.
Oh, sorry.
Just give me 1 second. Sorry.
So I will go to that Epic. I'll merge. There was 2 issues there I need to merge. That's fine. And I'm going to add 2 new ones. One is Pages needs to get building in a SHA, and basically the auto deploy setup now needs to change slightly, so they're not cutting their own releases. They're not relying on their own releases to auto deploy. And then the second one will be I'll have to figure out how to. I have to figure out the phrasing, but like, what do we need to do? Like, fair enough when we tag the net, like, let's say we turn the button on or the feature flag on, and the next RC that gets created, it all happily works. But what does that mean for existing? Like, what's the plan for existing releases? And I think the situation is going to be someone just sits down and like sets up everything previously for the past like 3 supported releases. And then we just...
that makes sense. Yeah. And we should somewhere, I don't know if it's either in that issue or on the EPIC exit criteria or something, we should just make sure we've gone through like a security release and a patch release and, you know, ticked off all the different types of releases, but we can build that in.
So good question. Like, how do we, like, if we don't have a security release to do, how do we like, or kind of, do we just fake one, I guess? Like, is that
we can usually just wait. Like, I think we've had sort of examples in the past where it's like, we're done, we believe we've done all the work, we're now just waiting. Good thing about security releases, we kind of know when they're coming up usually. So that's okay. Like, we can just leave the EPIC open and have it as a review thing.
Yeah, sure.
But,
Makes
patches,
sense.
we have in the past, we have sometimes done a patch just to make sure we can get through the process. So we have some flexibility there.
So what was the action item for me?
Yeah, so I was just wondering, would you be willing to take on the action to just put together the summary of if you adopt managed versioning, here is the process you will get, here are the changes that will possibly come, good and bad, and maybe any constraints that will come with that.
So
we
some
can
kind of maintainer's guide to manage the versioning. Very describing the process, not really as a you do this, you do that, but more of a...
I mean, yeah, absolutely. Or even, I mean, not even like as much as that, right? I like, you know, literally just, I guess, enough that we can get the pages maintainers to actually have something they can look at and actually see, oh, okay, so this is what's going to happen.
Marketing material.
Yeah, I guess that's a good way of putting it. Like, I think it's worthwhile saying, so on a security release, this is what you'll do. Merge onto your 3 stable branches and then nothing, like, for example, like that might, I don't know what it is, but, and then I think also we do need to call out explicitly, you no longer tag, you no longer give...
Understood. Yeah, I can do it. So let me...
I think changelog will be another big one as well. It sounds like there's some interesting trade-offs people would need to understand about changelogs. Like, I don't know. Pages do have their own changelog process. Hopefully it's similar, but I'm guessing it's probably not. So we should,
Well, at least we ask to align with the company one, so it's kind of
exactly.
It's kind of an easy ask, right? It's not just say you reinvented
totally.
Everything. You did this funny thing, right?
I think overall, I don't think funny. Might be funny me saying this now. I don't think we're going to have huge pushback if we can. I think it's hard for people to understand, but once they understand, hopefully it'll be clear. I think like people will be happy. I think, as I said, we do have to answer all those questions. It's all those questions, as you brought up, Alessia, of like, well, I'm so used to doing this. How does that affect that other process we didn't immediately think about?
So internally, because we started this conversation at the beginning about the requirement of tracking deployment on one side, and then we ended up with the other conversation about we actually track on the metadata layer, but probably we are not reading that information. So I would suggest that probably we would like to, in the implementation, revisit this and just follow the global metadata value, so that the requirement will become it's tracked on metadata, which is an internal requirement that we can take care of when we tag. And then so we can move the version tracking to the auto deploy section of this stuff, so that they benefit from knowing when their merge request is being released, but is not necessary for this work.
Okay. So you're looking to break that dependency now on looking at the canonical environments and deployments page.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. Makes sense. Like, and then we slowly inch around this idea of the metadata repository really being the absolute center of truth. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, because this is already there, right? So
I
not
agree.
You have to re-implement. It's a bit more complex to implement the other one than this one. This one is just we're tracking data. You put other stuff in there, and we'll. And we build that. It
did confuse me, like when I was looking through the code about that, like, I think we need to reduce the amount of places we're looking for something. And then we can further,
open
up. Sorry.
Sorry.
No, you're right.
So this means there's an extra item in that epics, which is some kind of
Okay.
refactor the tagging command to take a look at product version or release metadata, how you like it, to figure out the source for the new branches.
Yep, that makes sense. Cool. So did that and make pages build from show. And then, so
did we address the question, Alessio, that you raised about patch releases? Like, I think we kind of talked around it a little, but are we in agreement that managed versions gives you like a whole everything? Yeah, everything.
Gives you everything.
Yeah. Great. Okay.
I mean, it's very easy to sell. I mean, I don't see the problem. If just is you don't touch it, it works. So why should you bother with this? But I mean, you never know.
it is those. I think that's the tricky part. Like, I'm wary of time, so I'll try not to derail too much. But a whole other conversation, I guess, that we haven't even touched yet, but we do have to start thinking about is, I guess, the Gitly Ruby problem, like this hard dependency of components. Sorry, does it? Do they have a rate? I knew they talked to the Rails. I didn't realize
they have a
it was
gem. They just bump it
TRP.
once in 3 years, but so it's more stable. But they have exactly the same pattern.
Okay. So this is going to be a problem, like that we're going to have to work with the teams on some kind of guide, process, standard that it just isn't this tricky for whatever that means. Whether it's I don't like I'm talking off my head here. I don't know if there's something like we have to actually like package multiple copies of the gem in GitLab. You know what I mean? Like, and somehow like
so I think that what we ended up doing with pages, with Gitly is not that bad in sense that the gem itself is not managed by us. So when they want to bump the version, they bump it to an RC. So they do their own RCs so they can publish, and then they bump it to an RC, because this is not really that much visible to the end customers, just an internal detail.
No, but even internally, it feels, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. It feels a little weird to have to do that, but yeah, it's
you would admit I'm on a repo, but we are not talking about this. And
yeah.
yeah, that's the thing.
Because I guess the thing is it's like we're selling people, you get away from all these, like you go to Kaz and say, you don't have to tag anymore. We're doing all this. Oh, by the way, because you've got this Ruby gem, then you kind of still need to do some tagging, maybe. That's what I'm worried about, I guess. It's like perhaps a little bit of a mixed message. Not that but I don't know the solution. But yeah, and maybe there isn't a solution, but it is tricky because
I mean, I wonder if some of it's language, because now we have this terminology, like we've still got a lot of stuff kind of in release, but what we're sort of saying there is it's almost like independent, I don't know, like gem publish, or maybe there's a name that we don't have in existence that helps it be more obvious that it's a separate process.
Yeah, true. Yeah. And I think that's the thing too, because so Alessia, does these gems live in the code base of GitLab or in the code base of the components?
Components, that's the problem.
Right. Yeah. Right. See, the other thing is, does it make our lives easier if they move them into a separate component altogether? I guess not, because they need the bindings that are out in that component repo. Yeah. Okay. Anyway. Think about that in the future.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it'll be interesting to see as we go through a few components, like how common a theme this is. I'm going to be really curious to see like how pages like if this is what they were understanding they were getting, or how they feel about this kind of offer.
It's going to be something that's going to come up straight away as soon as we start doing independent deploys, because then that goes out the window, because you can't really be like, because you can't bump the gem and the Rails side and deploy your own component whenever you want, if I'm understanding things correctly.
That's
right?
you need, but that's across dependency. So you have a dependency, you need to keep things in sync. So
Oh,
it requires a lot of maturity from development team to make sure things are done in the proper order and validate that
Right.
the things are in place when they do their own deployment. That's fine.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that we should go through this week? No? One thing I just wanted to mention on a little bit. So Graham, you're out next week. Myra is coming out of release management next Thursday. So she'll also be able to, after that, join in. But it'd probably be good for us to at least check in with pages, maintainers, and know if we're going ahead with this one or not. And if we are, great, we can get things set up. If we're not, we can go figure out whether we have another stage group who are ready to work with us.
Yeah, I think if the only problem is the independent patch releases, it's not a problem at all, right? So the amount of problem we remove from them is such that they can just say, okay, we lose the patch release versioning.
Yeah, I hope that's true as well.
Yeah, it sounded more like theoretical things that they want to discuss more than a real problem, right? So,
Mm-hmm. Good.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thanks very much for the
Yeah,
chat.
thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Take
Have a
care.
good one. Bye.
See ya.